Admiral Laura Winters stood perfectly still on the bridge of the HMS Defiant, her eyes fixed on the massive holographic display floating in front of her. The blue glow of the map cast soft shadows across her weathered face. At 53 years old, she had seen more battles than any other fleet commander in human history. But this one would be different. This one would decide everything. Admiral, the quantum sensors are picking up unusual activity near the edge of the Proxima system, Commander Peter Mills said, his fingers dancing across the control panel. His voice was steady, but Laura could hear the tension beneath his professional tone. She nodded slowly, watching as red dots began appearing on the holographic map. Each dot represented a HFY warship, and there were hundreds of them. How many? She asked, though she already knew the answer would be bad. 743 ships, ma'am. It's their biggest fleet yet. Peter wiped sweat from his forehead with his uniform sleeve. They're forming up in their standard attack pattern. Laura allowed herself a small smile. The HFY were predictable that way. For a species that had ruled the galaxy for 50,000 years, they had trouble adapting to new situations. That was humanity's advantage. Send word to all ships, she ordered, battle stations, and get me a direct link to Earth Command. The bridge came alive with activity. Officers rushed to their posts, and the soft blue lighting shifted to combat red. Through the massive view screen, Laura could see the other ships of her fleet moving into position. 112 human vessels against 743 alien warships. 3 years ago, those odds would have seemed impossible. But that was before humanity learned the truth about their own potential. The main screen flickered, and General Richard Baker's face appeared. He was sitting in the Earth Defense Command Center, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. Laura, he said, skipping the formal greetings, I assume you're seeing what we're seeing. Yes, sir. The HFY are throwing everything they have at Proxima. They know if they lose here, they lose the war. She turned to look at another display, showing the colony below. 2 million human settlers lived on Proxima, the first human colony outside the solar system. We can't let them take this planet. Richard nodded grimly. The President has authorized the use of Protocol Omega. Whatever it takes. Admiral, whatever it takes. Laura's heart skipped a beat. Protocol Omega was their last resort. A weapon so powerful it had only been tested once, and that test had torn a hole in space-time that took 3 days to close. Understood, sir. Winters out. She turned back to her crew. They were young, all of them. Most had been civilians when the war started 3 years ago. Now they were mankind's best hope for survival. Listen up, she said, her voice carrying across the bridge. The HFY think they know everything about warfare. They've spent 50,000 years telling younger species what they can and can't do. They put blocks in our science, tried to control how we think, tried to limit what we could achieve. She paused, making eye contact with each officer. But they didn't count on human stubbornness. They didn't count on human creativity. And they sure as hell didn't count on human courage. The holographic display updated, showing the enemy fleet moving closer. Their ships were beautiful in a strange way, all curved lines and shimmering energy fields. Each one was at least twice the size of a human vessel. Commander Mills, send the activation codes for the quantum network to all ships. Lieutenant Carter, begin charging the dimensional anchor arrays. And someone get me Chief Engineer Martinez on the line. I want those new shield modifications ready in the next 10 minutes. As her crew rushed to comply with her orders, Laura thought about how far humanity had come. 3 years ago, when the HFY first appeared in Earth's orbit, they had expected humans to surrender immediately. Instead, humanity had done what it did best: adapt, improvise, and overcome. The quantum network had been their first breakthrough. By linking all their ships' computers together, they could coordinate faster than the HFY could react. The dimensional anchors came next, reverse-engineered from captured alien technology. And now they had Protocol Omega, A weapon that broke all the rules the Zex theory had tried to enforce on the galaxy. Enemy fleet will be in range in 5 minutes, Peter announced. All ships report ready for combat. Laura walked to the front of the bridge, clasping her hands behind her back. Send this message to all ships. Remember Earth. Remember Mars. Remember what they did to our colonies in the belt. Today, we show them that humanity will not be controlled. Today, we show them that their rules don't apply to us anymore. The first shots were fired at exactly 14:27 Earth Standard Time. The Zex theory ships launched their energy weapons, filling space with beams of destructive force that could tear through normal matter like paper. But humanity's ships weren't using normal shields anymore. "Dimensional shift complete," shouted Lieutenant Carter. "Their weapons are passing right through us." Laura allowed herself another small smile. The Zex theory had spent so long controlling other species that they'd forgotten how to handle true innovation. Their weapons were designed to work in normal space, but human ships could now partially shift between dimensions, making them virtually untouchable. "All ships, execute attack pattern Delta," Laura commanded. "Activate your quantum targeting systems and prepare to fire on my mark." The human fleet moved as one, their formations shifting in ways that would have been impossible without the quantum network linking their computers and crews. They flowed around the enemy fire like water around rocks, getting closer and closer to the massive alien fleet. "They're trying to adjust their weapons," Peter reported excitedly. "But they can't track our dimensional shifts." Laura nodded. The Zex theory were predictable in their responses too. They would try to adapt their existing weapons rather than try something new. "All ships, targeting solutions locked." "Yes, Mom. All ships report ready to fire." She took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. Fire. 112 human ships fired their weapons simultaneously. Not the simple energy weapons the Zex theory had expected, but something new, something impossible by their standards. Each shot carried a tiny quantum singularity, engineered to expand when it hit its target. The effect was devastating. Zex theory ships began to crumple as space itself twisted around them. Their beautiful energy fields flickered and died, and their massive hulls were crushed by forces they had never expected to face. Direct hits on 312 enemy vessels. Peter's voice was filled with awe. They're just gone, ma'am." But Laura knew it wasn't over yet. The remaining Zex theory ships were regrouping, preparing for another attack, and humanity's weapons needed time to recharge. "Get me a status report on Protocol Omega," she ordered. "We may need it sooner than we thought." As if in response to her words, the enemy fleet launched their counterattack. This time, they had adjusted their weapons to fire in multiple dimensions at once. Several human ships took direct hits, their crews fighting to maintain their dimensional shifts. "U.S. Liberty is reporting heavy damage," Peter called out. "The Sacramento and the Beijing are moving to cover them." Laura watched as the battle unfolded around her. This was what humanity had been preparing for. This was the moment when everything would change. She just hoped they were ready for what came next. She touched the small control panel on her command chair, entering her personal authorization code. On the screen in front of her, a new option appeared. Pirartosiodal Omigie, Armid. The future of humanity would be decided here, in orbit around humanity's first extrasolar colony. And Laura Winters intended to make sure it was a future of freedom, not control. Dr. Catherine Wright's hands shook as she held the alien data crystal up to the light. The small purple crystal sparkled under the bright laboratory lights deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. For 3 months, she and her team had been trying to decode the information stored within these crystals, found in the ruins of the Zex theory base on Mars. Today, something was different. "Daniel, come look at this," she called to her colleague. Daniel Carter walked over from his computer station, his dark-rimmed glasses slightly crooked on his face. As the lead AI specialist on the project, he had helped create the programs they used to decode alien technology. "What did you find?" he asked, leaning over her shoulder to look at the computer screen. Catherine pointed to the strange patterns flowing across her monitor. "Watch what happens when I run it through the new neural network." She typed a few commands, and suddenly the alien symbols began to transform. "That's impossible," Daniel whispered, but he was smiling. "The crystals responding to human brainwave patterns. How did you figure this out?" "I didn't," Catherine said, her eyes still fixed on the screen. "The computer did it on its own. Our AI made the connection." She paused, watching as more data poured across her screen. "The Zex theory. They've been lying to everyone." The door to the lab slid open, and General Richard Baker walked in. He looked tired. Everyone did these days, with the battle raging at Proxima. "Dr. Wright, I got your message. What's so urgent?" Catherine stood up, still holding the crystal. "General, we found something that changes everything. The Zex theory aren't just fighting us. They've been controlling all intelligent life in the galaxy for the past 50,000 years." She walked to the main display screen and brought up the translated data. "Look at this. They created a system of scientific barriers, mental blocks encoded into the very way other species think. They made it impossible for younger races to discover certain technologies." Daniel jumped in, his words coming fast with excitement. "It's like they planted a mental virus in every species they encountered. When scientists from these races tried to research certain topics, their minds would just skip over the important parts. They literally couldn't see the solutions, even when they were obvious." General Baker frowned. "But we've been advancing. We've even reversed some of their technology. How is that possible if we're blocked too?" Catherine smiled. "That's the beautiful part, sir. We're not blocked. Human brains process information differently. Our neural pathways are more flexible, and our AI systems, based on human brain patterns, can see right through their barriers." She brought up another display, showing brain scan comparisons. "The Zex theory assumed all species would develop along the same lines they did. They created their blocks based on their own way of thinking. But humans," she paused, looking for simple words to explain it. "We think sideways. We find different paths to the same answers. And our artificial intelligence makes it even better," Daniel added. "It takes our sideways thinking and makes it even more unpredictable. That's why we've been able to advance so quickly in the war. We're not just fighting their technology. We're fighting it in ways they never imagined possible." General Baker sat down heavily in one of the lab chairs. "So all this time, they weren't just fighting us. They were trying to force us into their control system." "Exactly," Catherine said. "But it gets worse. Look at this." She brought up a new set of data streams. They'd done this to thousands of species. Anytime a new race reaches a certain level of technology, the Zex theory show up. They either force them into submission or destroy them if they resist. "But why?" the general asked. "Why control everyone like this?" Catherine touched the crystal again, and new information appeared on the screen. "They're afraid. Long ago, they saw another civilization destroy itself with advanced technology. They decided that they had to control how other species developed, to prevent it from happening again." Daniel walked over to his computer and pulled up some calculations. "We think they expected Earth to be an easy target, a simple show of force, and we'd fall in line like everyone else. They didn't expect us to fight back. They definitely didn't expect us to start winning." "And now?" Baker asked, though he looked like he already knew the answer. "Now they're throwing everything they have at us," Catherine said quietly. "Because if we win, if we prove their control isn't necessary, everything they've built will fall apart. Other species will learn the truth. They'll break free." The general's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his face grew even more serious. "The battle at Proxima is reaching a critical point. Admiral Winters may have to use Protocol Omega." Catherine's eyes widened. "Sir, wait. These crystals, they're not just data storage. They're part of the Zex theory control network. If we can broadcast the right signal through their own network, we could disrupt their whole system. Daniel finished, already turning to his computer. Give me an hour. I can modify our quantum communication array to match their frequency. You have 30 minutes, Baker said, standing up. I'll tell Admiral Winters to hold off on Protocol Omega until she hears from us. He walked to the door, then turned back. If you're right about this, we're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for every species they've ever controlled. Catherine and Daniel worked frantically, their fingers flying over keyboards as they reprogrammed the quantum array. The crystal pulsed with purple light as they connected it to their systems. Neural pattern locked in, Daniel called out. Quantum frequency matching Zek's theory standards. Broadcasting in 3, 2, 1. Catherine pressed the final key. The crystal flared bright purple, then white, then seemed to vibrate in multiple dimensions at once. On their screens, they could see the signal racing out through space, carried by the Zek's theory's own network. Signal reaching Proxima now, Daniel said, watching the data stream. It's working. Their ships are losing dimensional anchor control. Catherine leaned back in her chair, finally allowing herself to breathe. We did it, she whispered. We really did it. General Baker's voice came over the intercom. Whatever you just did, it's working. Admiral Winters reports the enemy fleet is in chaos. Half their ships can't maintain position in normal space. Catherine looked at the crystal, still glowing with inner light. This is just the beginning, she said. Once other species learn they can break free of the controls, everything changes, Daniel finished. The whole galaxy changes. In orbit around Proxima Centauri, the battle was about to enter its final phase. But here in the quiet laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains, 2 human scientists had just changed the course of galactic history. Not with weapons or warships, but with the very thing the Zek's theory had tried to control, the power of human thought. The bridge of the HMS Defiant shook as another Zek's theory blast grazed their shields. Admiral Laura Winters grabbed her command chair to stay upright. The holographic display showed chaos unfolding across the battlefield. Hundreds of alien ships flickering in and out of normal space. Status report, she called out, keeping her voice steady despite the situation. Commander Peter Mills checked his screens quickly. The signal from Earth is working, ma'am. 60% of enemy ships are having trouble staying in our dimension. But, he paused, his face growing worried. The rest are adapting. They're changing their dimensional frequencies to block the signal. Laura nodded. She had expected this. The Zek's theory might be set in their ways, but they weren't stupid. Send word to Captain Susan Martinez. Tell her to begin Operation Checkmate. Peter's eyes widened. They had practiced this maneuver only once, and even then, they had lost 3 ships to dimensional turbulence. Yes, Mom. Sending the orders now. Laura turned to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Carter, activate the quantum communication network. Full power to all nodes. Across space, 112 human ships began to move in perfect synchronization. Their computers were linked through quantum entanglement, allowing them to coordinate faster than light itself. Captain Susan Martinez, aboard the HMS Valiant, led the first attack wing. All ships prepare for micro-jumps. Susan's voice came through the command channel. Remember your training. Trust your computers. Trust each other. She took a deep breath. Begin jump sequence. Now. The human fleet seemed to disappear, then reappear, then disappear again. Each ship was jumping through different dimensions thousands of times per second. To the Zek's theory targeting systems, they were everywhere and nowhere at once. Back on the Defiant, Laura watched the enemy fleet's reaction. They can't track us, she said, allowing herself a small smile. They've never seen anything like this. Admiral. Peter called out suddenly. Message from Earth Command. Dr. Wright and her team have made another breakthrough. They're sending new frequency data for our weapons. The quantum network transmitted the update to all ships instantly. Laura studied the new information and felt her heart beat faster. They'd found the Zex theory's resonant frequency, she said quietly. Send word to all ships. Modify your quantum singularity weapons to match these settings. On Earth, in the underground lab, Catherine Wright and Daniel Carter worked frantically with their new colleague, quantum physicist Ryan Cooper. They had connected their computers directly to the fleet's quantum network, allowing them to see the battle in real time. The frequency modulation is holding, Ryan said, his fingers dancing across his keyboard. If this works, their dimensional anchors won't just fail, they'll collapse completely. Catherine watched the battle display with nervous eyes. They'll be trapped in normal space. No more dimensional jumping. No more advanced weapons. She looked at her colleagues. Are we sure their ships can survive that? They have backup systems, Daniel assured her. We're not trying to kill them. Just ground them. Back in space, the battle had reached its peak. The human fleet continued its impossible dance through dimensions, appearing just long enough to fire their modified weapons before vanishing again. Each shot carried a precisely tuned quantum pulse that interfered with the Zex theory ship's dimensional technology. Direct hit on their flagship, Peter announced excitedly. They're losing dimensional control. They're dropping into normal space. Laura watched as the massive Zex theory command ship flickered and then solidified. Its beautiful energy fields disappeared, leaving only the physical hull. Around it, more and more alien ships were suffering the same fate. Message from the enemy flagship, Lieutenant Carter reported. They're requesting to open communications. The bridge fell silent. In 3 years of war, the Zex theory had never asked to talk. They had only given orders and made demands. Put them through, Laura ordered, straightening her uniform. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the Zex theory command ship. Their supreme commander, Zextal, looked both alien and somehow noble. His crystalline skin reflected light in complex patterns, and his 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Admiral Winters, he said, his translator converting his thoughts into English. You have done the impossible. Twice. Explain, Laura said firmly. First, you broke free of our developmental controls. And now, he gestured to his darkened bridge. You have stripped us of the very technology we use to control others. In 50,000 years, no species has achieved either feat. You have achieved both in 3 years. Laura stood tall. We didn't want this war. Supreme Commander, you came to our system. You tried to force us to live by your rules. Yes. Zextal's skin patterns shifted to show what might have been regret. We believed we were protecting the galaxy. We believed we were preventing disaster. We were wrong. In the Rocky Mountain lab, Catherine and her team listened to the exchange through the quantum network. She held the purple data crystal tightly, watching as its light pulsed in time with Zextal's words. Their whole empire, Daniel whispered. It was all built on fear. Fear of what might happen if they let others develop freely. Ryan nodded. And now, they're seeing what really happens. Innovation. Adaptation. Progress. Back on the Defiant, Laura made her decision. Supreme Commander, I am authorized to accept your surrender, but we have conditions. Name them, Zextal said. First, you will help us free all other species from your control systems. Second, you will share your true history with the galaxy, not as controllers, but as equals. And third, she paused. You will learn to trust in progress again, even if it's scary, even if it's unpredictable. The Supreme Commander was quiet for a long moment. Around his ship, the last of the Zex theory fleet was dropping into normal space, their dimensional technology completely neutralized by the human attack. We accept, he said finally. Perhaps it is time for the galaxy to grow up. For us to grow up. Laura nodded to Peter, who began transmitting ceasefire orders to all ships. The great battle of Proxima Centauri was over, but the real work, the work of freeing a galaxy of minds, was just beginning. In the lab, Catherine looked at her team. "We should get back to work," she said. "There are a lot of species out there waiting to learn how to think freely again." Daniel smiled. "Good thing humans are good teachers. And good thing we're stubborn," Ryan added with a laugh. The purple crystal pulsed one last time, as if agreeing with them. The age of control was ending. The age of freedom was about to begin. Lieutenant Amy Parker had never seen anything like the inside of a Zextheri ship before. The walls seemed to breathe with shifting patterns of light, and gravity changed direction depending on which corridor you walked through. As the newly appointed diplomatic officer of the HMS Defiant, she was the first human to officially tour their flagship. "The patterns you see," her guide explained, "a Zextheri named Valtech, are our ship's thoughts. In your terms, you might call it a living computer." Amy touched one of the walls gently. The lights swirled around her hand like curious fish. "Your whole ship is alive." "In a way," Valtech said. His crystalline skin glimmered as he moved. "But that is not what troubles you, is it? You have questions about what the Supreme Commander said." She nodded. The revelation that the Zextheri Empire was actually an elaborate simulation had shocked everyone. "How does it work? This control system of yours?" Valtech led her into a large chamber that Amy could only describe as a library. But instead of books, the room was filled with floating crystals, each one pulsing with its own inner light. Each crystal, Valtech explained, contains what you might call a program. When we found a new species, we would introduce these programs into their development. Small changes in how they thought about science, about progress, about what was possible. You changed how people think. Amy tried to keep the horror out of her voice. "We thought we were protecting them. Protecting everyone." Valtech's skin patterns shifted to show what Amy was learning to recognize as sadness. 50,000 years ago, we witnessed a terrible thing. A species called the Precursors. They developed too quickly, created technologies they couldn't control. They destroyed themselves and 3 entire star systems in the process. In the center of the library, a large crystal projected a hologram of a massive explosion spreading across multiple solar systems. Amy watched in silence as the light from the destruction faded. After that, Valtech continued, "We decided to become guardians. To prevent such disasters from happening again, we created the control programs, the blocks in scientific understanding. We built an empire based on careful, controlled progress." "But it wasn't real progress," Amy said quietly. "Real progress includes mistakes, includes learning from those mistakes." "Yes." Valtech touched one of the floating crystals. "We understand that now. Your species showed us something we had forgotten. There is more than one path to the future." Back on Earth, Dr. Catherine Wright was giving a similar tour to Supreme Commander Zextal himself. They stood in her laboratory, surrounded by screens showing data from the broken control systems. "Your neural networks," Zextal said, studying the displays. "They think in ways we never imagined possible, ways we had forgotten were possible." Catherine nodded. "Human brains are messy. We make connections that don't always make sense. Sometimes that leads to mistakes, but sometimes it leads to breakthroughs," Zextal finished. "Like seeing through our control programs. Tell me, Dr. Wright, what will you do with this knowledge?" "We want to help the other species," she said firmly. "Not control them like you did, but help them break free. Help them think for themselves again." The Supreme Commander's skin patterns shifted in what might have been approval. "There are over 10,000 species affected by our programs. The process will not be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Catherine replied with a smile. On the bridge of the Defiant, Admiral Laura Winters was having a similar conversation with her crew. The holographic display showed the current status of known space, with areas of Zextheri control marked in purple and human space in blue. "Commander Mills," she said, "what's the status of the quantum network?" Peter checked his readings. "Stable and expanding, ma'am. Dr. Wright's team has figured out how to use it to transmit the deactivation signals for the Zextheri control programs. We've already reached 12 nearby systems. And the responses? Mixed, Peter admitted. Some species are angry when they realize they've been controlled. Others are scared of developing too quickly. But most, he smiled, most are like us. Curious, ready to learn, ready to grow. Laura nodded. This was the real victory, not defeating the Zexatherian in battle, but helping the galaxy think freely again. In the library aboard the Zexatheri flagship, Amy was learning more about the species they would need to help. Valtech showed her crystal after crystal, each one containing the history and cultural information about different civilizations. The Arcanian people, he explained, showing her a crystal that glowed soft green, were on the verge of discovering dimensional physics when we found them. We redirected their research into safer areas. And now they can think freely again. Already, their scientists are making connections they never could before. They have contacted us, asking for guidance, not control, but true teaching. Amy touched the crystal gently. That's what we all should have been doing from the start. Teaching each other, learning from each other. Valtech's skin patterns showed agreement. The simulation is ending. The galaxy is waking up, and we have your species to thank for it. Back in her lab, Catherine was explaining to Zextal how they had first discovered the truth. She held up the purple crystal that had started everything. We found this in your Mars base, she said, but we didn't try to crack its security or break its programming. We just looked at it differently. Let our eye think about it in new ways. Your artificial intelligence, Zextal mused, based on human neural patterns, but even more flexible, even more creative. Another thing we never considered possible. Because you were too focused on control, Catherine said gently, on preventing disasters. You forgot that progress needs freedom to work. Freedom to fail sometimes, yes, but also freedom to succeed in unexpected ways. The Supreme Commander was quiet for a moment. We have much to learn from humans, he said finally. Perhaps that is why this happened now. Perhaps the galaxy needed a species that could teach the teachers. As the day drew to a close, Amy stood with Valtech in the Zexatheri library one last time. The crystals floated around them, each one representing a civilization waiting to be freed from mental controls that they never knew they had. It will take time, Valtech said, to undo 50,000 years of control, to help each species find their own path forward. Amy smiled. Good thing humans are patient teachers. She paused. Well, sometimes patient. We're also pretty good at finding shortcuts. Valtech's skin patterns showed what Amy was pretty sure was amusement. The next phase of galactic history was beginning. Not one of control and fear, but one of freedom and discovery. And humanity would help lead the way. 6 months after the Battle of Proxima Centauri, the Earth looked different. Massive ships from 100 different alien species filled the skies above every major city. But they weren't there to fight. They were there to learn. Fleet Admiral Laura Winters stood at the window of the newly built Galactic Council building in Geneva. The massive structure combined human and Zexatheri architecture, with walls that shifted like living crystal and windows that could show views from anywhere in known space. Quite a change from the war room, isn't it? Dr. Catherine Wright said, walking up beside her. The scientist looked tired but happy. She had spent the last 6 months helping species after species break free from the Zexatheri control programs. Sometimes I still can't believe it, Laura admitted. A year ago, we were fighting for our survival. Now we're teaching advanced physics to races that have been spacefaring longer than humans have existed. The main display in the council chamber showed the updated galactic map. Human-controlled space now extended throughout the Orion Arm, not through conquest, but through cooperation. Blue lines showed the quantum communication network, connecting thousands of worlds. Admiral, Dr. Wright, a familiar crystalline voice called out. They turned to see Supreme Commander Zextal approaching, his skin patterns showing peaceful colors. The Arcanian delegation is ready for their first lesson in dimensional physics. Laura smiled. How are they handling their newfound freedom of thought? Like children discovering they can run for the first time, Zextal said. They are enthusiastic, much like humans. In another part of the building, Lieutenant Amy Parker was leading a different kind of class. Representatives from 30 different species sat in a room designed to accommodate everything from methane-breathing giants to tiny silicon-based life forms. The key to human innovation isn't just thinking outside the box, she explained. It's questioning why there's a box in the first place. For too long, you were all taught that certain things were impossible. Today, we're going to start unlearning those limits. Her friend Valtek stood at the back of the room, watching with interest. His job had changed from enforcing limits to helping remove them. He found he preferred this new role. In the research wing, Daniel Carter and Ryan Cooper worked with alien scientists, teaching them how to create their own AI systems based on their unique neural patterns. Every species thinks differently, Daniel explained to a group of fascinated researchers. That's not a weakness. It's our greatest strength. When we combine our different ways of thinking, we can solve problems none of us could solve alone. Ryan nodded, pulling up a holographic display of various neural patterns. Look at how the Zextheri think in crystal clear lines, while humans think in messy webs, and the Arcanians think in spiral patterns. Each way has its advantages. Commander Peter Mills, now head of the Galactic Defense Network, entered the room with exciting news. The quantum network just reached the edge of the Sagittarius Arm, he announced. Another 1,000 worlds are asking to join the Federation. This was the name they had chosen. The Galactic Federation. Not an empire built on control, but a union of free peoples working together. Earth had become its heart, not because humans ruled, but because they taught. In her private office, Laura reviewed reports from across known space. Species that had been stuck at the same technological level for thousands of years were making breakthroughs daily. The Zextheri's careful controls were being replaced by careful guidance. It's amazing how fast they're advancing, Catherine said, looking over the reports. But they're not just copying our technology. They're developing their own ways, their own solutions. That's the point, Laura replied. We're not here to tell them what to do. We're here to show them what's possible. The door chimed, and Amy Parker entered with more news. The precursor artifacts have been found, she said excitedly. The Zextheri finally revealed their location. A team of multi-species researchers is studying them now. And? Laura asked. And it turns out the precursors didn't destroy themselves through reckless advancement. They were trying to contain a natural disaster, a chain of supernovas that threatened their worlds. They sacrificed themselves to save billions of others. Catherine sat down heavily. So the Zextheri built their whole control system on a misunderstanding. They saw destruction and assumed it was due to technological recklessness, Amy explained. They never knew the precursors died as heroes. In the main council chamber, preparations were underway for the first full meeting of the Galactic Federation. Representatives from over 10,000 species would attend, either in person or through quantum projections. Laura stood at the podium, looking out at the gathering crowd. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and compositions filled the room. Some floated in anti-gravity fields, others swam in specially designed tanks, and still others shifted between different forms as they moved. Are you ready? Catherine asked, standing beside her. Laura nodded. I think so. It's not every day you help start a new age of galactic history. The room quieted as she began to speak. Welcome to Earth, she said, her words being translated into thousands of languages simultaneously. For 50,000 years, the galaxy lived under a system of control and limitation. That age is over. She gestured to the great map showing the newly freed worlds. We stand at the beginning of something new. Not an age of reckless advancement, but one of careful cooperation. Not an age of enforced limits, but one of shared wisdom. Supreme Commander Zextal stepped forward to stand beside her. My people spent 50 millennia trying to prevent disaster, he said. We forgot that the greatest disaster is to stop growing. to stop learning, to stop dreaming. Catherine joined them at the podium. Every species in this room thinks differently, sees the universe differently, solves problems differently. Together, there is nothing we cannot achieve. As if to emphasize her words, the quantum network pulsed with new connections, more worlds joining, more minds linking together, more possibilities opening up. In orbit above Earth, ships of all designs and origins moved in complex patterns. Some studied human technology, others taught their own innovations. All worked together in a dance of cooperation that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. Laura looked out at the assembled beings, former enemies, new allies, eager students, and willing teachers. "The galaxy is awake," she said simply, "and we have all of time and space to explore together." The chamber erupted in a chorus of cheers, roars, song, and other expressions of joy from 1,000 different species. The age of control was truly over. The age of freedom had begun. And humanity, the species that had broken free and helped others do the same, stood ready to help lead the way into whatever wonders or challenges awaited them among the stars.